Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got a couple of amazing guys on the show today, and we are going to be talking about how groups help after a loss. But they've got great stories, and I've worked with some really interesting people.
They have, Mom, and so, like you said, we're going to talk about the importance of groups, and we know how important they are. And we've got Richard Beck and Paul Rubin here, and I will introduce them. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
So let me start with Richard. Richard and I have known each other for a very long time. We have, right? We've worked together in a lot of different capacities. So we first met because he rented an office to me, and we were suite mates.
Ah, suite mates.
Yeah, suite mates, and it was great. It was great.
I love that office.
From there, our relationship transformed, and he became my supervisor for 3 years, and he was phenomenal, I have to tell you. And we have been teaching together at Columbia for the last, 4 or 5 years.
I've been there 6, so you've been there 15.
Yes, I've been there 15, you've been there 6. So
Right.
we were at Columbia and we teach in the School of Social Work together.
Exactly.
So, and we're friends. So, and when Richard's not doing all that, he is the president of the International Association for Group Psychotherapy and Group Process. And he is a faculty at Columbia, at New York Presbyterian Hospital, and at Weill Cornell Medical College. So welcome to the show, Richard.
And I have a full-time practice in my spare time.
How can I forget that? He's got a full-time private practice, which is thriving on 72nd Street, and we'll find out how to get in contact with him towards the end of the show.
Right.
Yes, and next to him is Paul Rubin.
Yes.
And Paul is a clinical mental health counselor, and he is also the executive director of Camp Good Mourning in Long Island. And this is a camp for children that have had the death of a parent or the death of a sibling.
Correct.
So, and he's also been on our podcast.
Absolutely a great guest.
Yes.
So we wanted to have him in, and we're excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Well, Richard, I wanted to start the show a little bit because we all love stories, and you're in the group psychotherapy, but tell us a little bit about some of the things that happened in your family.
We were talking earlier about both of my parents being Holocaust survivors, and how that's where my trauma training started, because I'm a trauma therapist and a grief therapist, just as both of you are experts. So my training, I've treated attorneys they became attorneys by having to negotiate for the salt and pepper over the table to learn to argue and discuss. But my training really came from both my parents. My father lost both his parents, and my mother lost her sister to the gas chambers. And every Friday night, when she was lighting the Sabbath candles when I was growing up, I would just bear witness, as Judith Herman talks about the idea of bearing witness, without understanding the real impact, but feeling it, and then learning, and as we did in supervision and then we teach, to really respect allowing the process for people, whatever people have lived through, for us to respectfully bear witness to it. So I was mentioning earlier the uncertainty of life, how my parents were in Vienna on Kristallnacht.
When all the crystal was broken, and they called it Crystal Night when the Nazis came in.
1938, I believe it was.
Wow.
And then they escaped to Switzerland by pretending to be drunken lovers with nothing but the shirts on their, with nothing. My parents had nothing when they left Austria. And pretending to be drunken lovers past guards with machine guns.
Wow.
What I learned later from my aunt and uncle in Australia, who were filmed in Spielberg's Shoah project. And as I was watching it, they told me that everybody who tried to escape under that bridge was machine gunned and killed.
Wow.
Wow.
So just the idea of not knowing about life and to be comfortable with not knowing.
So thankfully they weren't under the bridge. They could have been.
They could have, but my father decided, let's go this way.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the uncertainty and the 9/11, because you've all been involved with the 9/11. You two have been involved in helping people survive it, and you also have, haven't you, Paul?
Yeah, one of my first experiences working in a bereavement camp, I was being paired with a child who was 8 or 9 years old, and unfortunately his dad had perished in the 9/11 attacks. His dad worked at Windows on the World, and this had been his first camp. English was not his first language, so you can just imagine, yes, Spanish. Yes, Spanish was his first language, and you can imagine that a child who was coming to a camp not necessarily being all that familiar with the language, with about 150 other people, it could be a little intimidating,
Yes.
especially if it's a sleepaway camp. So,
Right.
so they, he came up with mom, and then mom left. So again, he's left by himself, and we worked together. But the thing that I noticed was that he was very introverted. He was very shy, and understandably so. And he didn't really share much. But in between activities, I would ask very, very general, soft questions. Tell me something about your dad. What did you like to do with your dad? And he would say, oh, I'd love to play baseball. I'd love to have a catch. Well, what was the thing that your dad, what did your dad do? He was a cook. What was a favorite meal? And you would see his face light up. And that was the extent of the weekend in terms of him chatting. Anytime we went into our support groups, he really didn't share much. He was very fidgety, again, understandably so. It's very common for a little boy who's 8 or 9 years old to just kind of fidget. And but we know that he's taking everything in. And
he's with other kids.
Yes, he's with other kids. So these support groups had about 8 other kids, and each child was paired with a big buddy. So it was 1-to-1. And in these groups, we would talk about different things. And he would never share anything. He just didn't share. And at the end of camp, I just remember that his mother was unable to come back to pick him up. So they sent a town car. And all I could think about was this boy was just opened up. He heard all of these things, all these different stories. And now he's going back home in a town car with a driver who he doesn't know, and he's traveling 90 miles back to New York City. I can only imagine what was going through his mind. And as he was leaving, he got to the town car, and he stuck his hand out, but then he turned right around, and he gave me a hug around the waist. And my heart melted and broke at the same time. But there's a really good ending, because the following year, he wound up signing up again.
Wow.
And he asked for me to be his big buddy.
He was attached to you.
He was. He was.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The biggest thing was when he came out of the car, but this time he came up with his mother and his little brother, he gave me a big high five, but ran right past me, because he did connect with other kids. And that's what the group process is. So that's how connections are so important.
But you were the kind of the stable dad. He was running off because you were
I think
there.
I want to say I was the conduit so that he was able to really, but yes.
And peer-to-peer support is so powerful. And I know with Richard, after 9/11, you went down to the site. You started working with businesses in that area. Well, tell us about what you did, and ran 9/11 groups, right?
Oh, I ran a lot of groups.
You did. So
I ran 1,500 hours worth of trauma groups a week. No, not a week, God forbid. In the time I was doing the grief work.
Did you do it? You not only did it out of your office, but you went on site.
Most of the trauma work after 9/11 I did in an insurance company that lost hundreds of people. I ran 3 groups every Tuesday.
Wow.
For the insurance company.
And this insurance company, didn't they overlook Ground Zero? They were close to Ground Zero, weren't they? There was one.
Well, that was another company I treated. I mean, I treated a lot. I treated the Office of Emergency Management for the city. I treated the firemen, the police, and the EMS workers.
So, Richard, tell me what you would do. You would walk into, whether it be the FDNY, the NYPD, or a corporation, you would walk in and people would know you were there. And wouldn't they...
I'll tell you a story, if I may.
Yes, do. Please tell me a story about what it looked like.
The corporation that I was invited to help, they didn't know me. The fellow who worked with them for 3 months burnt out. And I was referred to them. So their CEO and their head of human resources and all the vice presidents met with me in their New York City makeshift office, and they're sitting around. They said, how are you going to help me?
I like that question.
And I looked at them. Can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay, so I said, I don't have a fucking clue. And they looked at me and they said, we like you. You can stay. And 3 groups every Tuesday for 3 years, from everyone from the secretaries to the upper echelon. I went to the 10th year anniversary at their company, and as well as a hospital I treated and therapists that I treated, and I've presented on what I've learned from 9/11's experience all around the world.
So
now.
Richard, weren't these open groups? I mean, at first...
Anyone could come to
So,
it.
okay, so at first did you find that they didn't trust you and didn't know you, and there was just a few, and then they probably told their friends, and it didn't grow over
It
time?
basically grew.
Okay, so the more that you
I
were
trusted
there...
them as much as they trusted me.
So the more that you were there, and that they knew you were coming back, and that you were a safe person, the more that people started to come.
Like what Paul was saying, I'm sure with the kid, he became attached to you, he got to know you.
Yeah.
People get to know us and trust us. And just being present. It's not about being smart. It's about being with people.
That's what I loved about Paul's story, because the kid ran the other way, but you were there.
That's right.
You were there. I mean,
And
they
that's
just had
that's
to
all
know
they
you were
want.
on site. They,
Yes.
you know.
That's exactly, kids of all ages.
And I'm
Yes.
just wondering, what do you both think is the difference between working individually with someone versus someone working in a group setting?
Well, one of the...
Want to go? We looked at each other. It doesn't matter. You can be right, I can be. It doesn't matter. It's not about being right.
That's right.
It's about being with. It's about being with.
Yes,
So
there you go.
one of the things I think that's really important is that the kids can connect to each other.
Yeah.
Because frequently kids, especially when in school, they don't know anybody else, unless it, unless it's directly, has to do with them. They really don't know anybody else who's. So they wind up being isolated, or they wind up. Kids don't know how to talk about it, and they don't want to upset the child, so they just don't do anything, which is not helpful either. So in groups, and I'm hoping that you can share also.
doing great. You're doing
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This is the way groups work, right?
We adjust, we correct.
Totally the way groups...
Creating their learning. Their audience.
That's right.
So what we do is help to connect their stories. And by one person sharing
And we
with one
listen to
child,
them too.
so important.
Absolutely.
What did you say?
We listen to the
Oh,
stories.
yeah, right.
So
We
it's
lose the script, we listen to what goes on. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's okay if like that sort of thing happens,
Right.
Because it just breaks the ice. And so you have a little laughter in the middle, and then it almost normalizes everything. The shoulders kind of release. And so we can have a little laugh and then get back to the stuff. And then one child will say one thing, and then, my mom also died from cancer. And the connection is made. And then after group, they wind up chatting about their experiences.
You know, Heidi, I remember when you went to the University of Utah, you've talked about it before, nobody had lost their sibling.
Right.
Or
I was the only,
talking
I mean,
about
I was only 20. And no, I had never, ever met anybody that had a brother or sister die. And I didn't even know anyone that had a parent die at that age.
Yeah.
So it would have been so invaluable to be able to have a group, and go to someone
not
like Paul or
alone,
Richard.
is
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say.
What are your thoughts, Richard, about the difference between working in group, because you do a lot of group work and you also do individual work? Why are groups so powerful, and why do they help people heal after loss?
I think it's about, we're hardwired to connect with other people. We're not alone. We can sit, we can listen, we can help someone else, we can be helped by someone else. We reduce our sense of isolation, we can reduce a sense of shame. I lived, someone else didn't live. And a group can really slowly help metabolize what people have found indigestible emotionally. Undigestible? Indigestible?
Yeah.
It sticks.
Well, Heidi, I know you used to talk about survival guilt.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think a lot of people, I always thought survivor guilt after sibling loss was just something that I went through. And I thought there was something wrong with me in thinking the wrong child died. Because I felt like it should have been me instead of my brother, who was the only boy in the family with a sea of sisters.
Understood.
Yes, so I needed someone to say understood. And once I got with my peer support group of Compassionate Friends, I realized...
Which are a group.
Yes, which are a group of siblings that have had a loss. I heard over and over and over, we felt the same way, and it was very normalizing for me, because I realized I wasn't alone, and I realized this was a common theme in many siblings that had had a loss. And I think that's the power of group, one of the things that happened. I'm wondering, and we get this question all the time when we work with parents, how do you get people to go to camp, to go to group, and to stay in these keep coming back? Richard, do you want to take this first? No.
Word of mouth I have always found.
Okay.
Teach, relate to people, meet people, connect with people. It's a human connection. The internet is a way to be known, which is helpful, but it's always the personal connection I found is really the best way. Somebody's been helped by a group therapist or an individual therapist. Who do you trust? I was telling earlier, one of the psychiatrists at a hospital I'm with was looking for a psychiatrist in Paris. So I called up, I emailed earlier, and I found a connection in Paris with a psychiatrist. It's knowing somebody rather than just saying, oh, here's the internet, these are the listings of the medical society or the psychology
and having
society.
clients that have come to you that have liked working with you in groups, saying to their friends, I really got a lot of help out of Richard Beck's group. Yeah. And what are your thoughts about this, Bob?
No, I agree with that. I think it's really important that the connection is there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what, it isn't so much the group leaders, right? We're just there to facilitate. It's really the members of the group that make the group.
With some skill.
With some
With a little
skill,
skill.
yes.
So, Paul, how do you get your
Just
kids?
like hosts, with some skill.
Yeah, right. How do you get your kids to go to camp?
Well, one of the ways is through connections. So what we'll do is we'll reach out to schools. We do a lot of marketing on the internet, on social media. So people, the biggest thing is just making people aware that this service exists, because most people have never heard, at least the ones that I've, in my experience, have never heard of a bereavement camp for kids. So go ahead.
And how long is it? How long is the bereavement camp? Camp Mourning?
So it's 2 weekends, one in the spring and one in the fall. And it's from a Friday, so right after school, the surviving parent, if it's a parent loss, will bring their children or child to camp. They'll drop them off. They'll come back Sunday afternoon to pick them up, and we'll have a big celebratory thing as well as a way of honoring, their loved ones. But we do that throughout the entire weekend. The important thing is that we have one in the spring and one in the fall, because traditionally most camps happen in the summertime. And we know that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
We know that grief just doesn't happen in July and August.
Anniversaries are so important also to be aware of when the anniversary of Scott's death, I'm sure it touches your whole family. The anniversary of that child's death, the meaning of it and the anniversary, it just brings people back, and you're not even aware of it. Why am I feeling so sad or disoriented today? Oh, it's the anniversary of this person's death or that person's death.
Yeah, people are always concerned about that, and I always say, oh, doesn't it bother you? I mean, it's been years since Scott died, and I said, if it touches me, I love it. I mean, it hurts, but I want to be real. I want to feel.
That's right.
Nobody wants to be like a stone or a piece of wood or something. I mean, you want to be able to touch those spaces.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, Paul, have you ever had a child that went to the camp and at first was new and didn't want to be there?
So I've volunteered at other camps where that's happened.
Okay.
And kicking and screaming.
Wow.
And the parent had to literally bribe the child. Just if you don't like it, I'll come and get you tomorrow, but stay today. And what happens is that they form those connections. And once they have...
There's a lot about the parents, too.
So once they're able to form those connections and they see that it isn't all sad, it's just an opportunity to connect. There's a lot of fun that goes on at camp. It's all fun and games with support groups sprinkled in. So it's really important. And when they leave, they want to know when the next one is. So it's very, very, very rare for a child not want to come back or to go home.
So once they make those connections, and I'm wondering with Richard, we have heard over and over and over that if somebody can stay in a group 3 times, they will often stay. Do you ever feel that holds true? At first that they might be new in the group and not want to come back, but if they just stick with it?
I let people know, give it 3 months.
Oh, 3 months. I like
That's
this,
the
Richard.
paradigm that when someone's interested, not in a trauma group where, let's say, yesterday in Baton Rouge there were floods and tornadoes. If we were in Baton Rouge now, we wouldn't say you have to stay 3 times. You'd be dealing with, do you have a phone, do you have a place to stay? But for a regular group, a grief group, a bereavement group, I would say this group will stay at least 3 months. Make that commitment of life to the group, because when you leave early, it affects other people's lives as well in the group. It's
So-
thought through.
Yeah, I like this.
I wanted to ask, for people who are watching this show now, how do I know whether I should have a child or an adult or whatever in individual therapy as opposed to group therapy? I mean, I'm hearing this group therapy sounds like the way to go. I mean, how do I know which kind of treatment people need?
Your turn.
Okay.
Or I mean, maybe even maybe which kind of treatment I need.
In Europe, for example, because I do a lot of international work now,
Yeah.
group is the preferred way.
Oh, wow.
Individual is the exception. How I think about group is who isn't appropriate for a group, and then why not, and then see them individually. I think everyone can benefit from being in a group. So I hope that answers your question
Yeah,
somewhat.
yeah.
So anyone and everybody can benefit from being in a group.
Right.
If you have a group member that's monopolizing, I guess the group leader is skilled at figuring out how to navigate that and how to deal with that in a way that doesn't shame that person.
Yes. Yes.
Now,
So-
how do I know with my kid whether he needs this play therapy and sand and little toys and all that kind of stuff, or does he need to be out with some kids doing stuff? I don't know.
Well, it depends. It's really up to, every child really kind of, or every individual reacts differently to different modalities.
Right.
And so it's our job, I think, to try to figure out what works best for that person. What would you say?
I agree with you.
I like the way you said that.
Oh,
I'm gonna remember that when I
good.
teach. It is.
So essentially, it's finding out, and I've been working with one child who just wasn't doing the talk thing, and then we switched over to play, and it just rolls.
Yeah.
It's as if there's
Exactly.
if there's nothing going on but us playing cards, and it's amazing. So again, it's finding out what works for them.
Yeah. Richard, you're agreeing with this.
I'm agreeing, and my mind's in
Yeah,
several places
yeah.
trying to figure out how best to answer and also relate to what you're saying. For example, at Columbia, I've been teaching
Yeah.
13, 14 times the treatment of childhood sexual abuse, which is a real kind of loss also.
Yeah, wow, that's
And-
a tough feat.
It is. It really
Whoa,
is.
Richard.
People say, what do you teach? And I say that, and they go, but I say, let's talk.
Yeah.
And there are different schools of thought. Some are more cognitively based, that you're working with the thinkings, and others are more nonverbal. The art and music and nonverbal ways to reach the child and make someone, a boy or girl, feel safe, or an adult. So there's real benefits to both. The talk therapy, the art therapy, the nonverbal therapy, like psychodrama or analytic work. There are different ways to work.
I like that. And I've got to say, because Richard was my supervisor, I've got to give a shout out to him. He is really incredible about no matter what I would present to him and how traumatic the loss would sound, he was without judgment and he was just very calm about taking it in. He didn't go, oh, or respond that way. And I think that's important when people have had traumatic loss, that the people that they're working with don't overreact, because then we'll feel like, well, they can't handle the stories we're bringing in.
And
With Paul, whatever the children have lived through,
Yes.
you listen to them.
Exactly.
Yes.
yep.
It's all, and I'm sure we've all heard the saying, there's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's to listen twice as much.
I like that.
I
Well,
like
let's
that.
find out where to get in touch with you guys. You want to start and tell people?
If people are interested in Camp Good Mourning, they can go to our website at Camp Good Mourning, and it's mourning.org. They can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Camp Good Mourning. Again, mourning.
Okay. And do you have a private practice or anything?
I
that you
work
wanna-
within a group practice.
Do you want to?
Sure, it's called Great South Bay Therapy,
Okay.
Great South Bay Therapy.
which is in Sayville, Long Island.
Very
Okay.
good.
All right. Richard.
For my private practice, I'm at richardbecktherapy.com. And for the group work I do, there's the international group, which is iagp.com. And then there's the American Group Psychotherapy Association, which is agpa.org, I believe. But there's so many good group organizations to connect with.
For those of you that are watching, I put up your whole board, as well as your picture as president with your board.
From all over the world. And
Yes.
the exec,
So that people can see what you all look like
right?
and know where to go.
The exec
if
is
they want to get
from
involved.
Egypt and Greece and Spain and Austria and
Wow.
Amsterdam.
I love
And me
it.
from New York.
Fabulous.
You're quite the international traveler.
Yes, yes.
Grief and loss is universal. It's
Yeah.
Yep, yep. You know, when people
Yeah.
say that people aren't really grieving properly in the United States, I don't know, Richard, we'll have to have a conversation with that. I
Absolutely.
think, I just think people grieve all over the world, you know, and they have their ways of grieving.
Within
and-
the culture, absolutely.
Within the culture.
In the culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Long Island culture.
Exactly, exactly.
Brooklyn culture.
Brooklyn.
Shout out.
So, well, we want to thank you guys for being on the show. Can you give our people that are grieving one piece of really sage advice?
You're not alone, and there's hope. There's hope. Your organization, the idea of cultivating hope, it's a blessing.
Thank you.
Grief is as unique as a fingerprint. Everyone's process is different, and be true to your own.
I like it. Good
Well-
advice, guys.
Yeah. And you got to find some great people like this to work with you.
Yes, absolutely.
And I honestly feel that people do need to put a little effort into finding somebody who understands grief and loss, if that's where they
Yes.
are. Not every therapist, you know, that's not their specialty.
I
You know.
agree. Not every therapist is the same. You need to shop around and find people like Paul and Richard who are experts in grief and loss. And you guys are doing phenomenal work, so thank you.
And I love what you say, Heidi. Sometimes you say, if you don't like the therapist, interview your therapist
Right.
and find
Use-
somebody
use
else
the
if it
first
doesn't work.
session
How do
as
you
a
feel
way.
by that?
Use your first session to see if you're a good fit. I mean, when I was, working with Richard as a supervisor, I wanted a supervisor that I could identify with, relate to, and be vulnerable with. I mean,
Yeah.
if we weren't a good fit, I would have found a different
Right.
supervisor.
So, yeah. Well, listen, thank you guys. You're fabulous and really enjoyed having you in the
dealing
show.
with you. Same
And we always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.